Hello, everyone. My name is Max. I'm a cloud architect here at Veeam, responsible for EMEA region. I work mostly with service providers, but sometimes also with large enterprises. I will cover today's session for Veeam Backup for AWS, mostly, so the focus will be on the public cloud solution we have. We will cover new features like Veeam Service Provider Console integration. So first 20-30 minutes, it will be a slideshow. Then I will switch to my lab. And if we have time, I will cover Q&A session. If I won't be able to answer all your questions, we will follow it up separately after the webinar. So if you have any questions, issues with connection, you cannot see the screen, drop it in the chat. We have a chat and Q&A panel, so you can use both. I will try to track all of them. I have also my colleagues here who will help me to identify any sound issues. So should be good, should be good. Okay, so speaking about the webinar, we have tight agenda today, so we will cover layouts for service providers. So previously in best practices, we had 2 scenarios. Currently, we have the third one. I will cover it in the first time. How Veeam Backup for AWS works. This will be the first entry point, like how it works in general. Then we will see some sizing examples and cover briefly other options for data protection in AWS outside of Veeam Backup for public cloud appliance. So we usually speak about modern data protection, and this is our core focus nowadays. So it's public cloud, Veeam Backup for AWS, Veeam Backup for Azure, and Veeam Backup for GCP. They are more or less the same. Veeam Backup for AWS usually have more features than the rest. Veeam Backup for GCP has less features because it was released latest. So separate teams develop it according to best practices of the hyperscaler. So yeah, let's now go to the layouts. I believe this is the most interesting part for you. How you can deploy this. So the first layout is for you to share full access to the appliance with the tenant. So it means that you deploy Veeam Backup for AWS appliance in the tenant subscription or in your subscription, in service provider subscription. So basically data processors, which are workers, repository, which is S3 bucket, and the control plane, Veeam Backup for AWS appliance is deployed in one single tenant. AWS IAM and SQS is responsible for connections, for connectivity, for accounts, for roles and access of resources which are available to Veeam Backup for AWS appliance. From the management perspective, you have Veeam Backup on replication in place with AWS plugin installed. So it's not something you should install separately usually, but if you are on some eldest version, you should probably deploy it separately. So ports here listed for you, for your reference, to pay attention to it so they can be updated. So I strongly recommend to check the Help Center guide to get the exact ports you need to open. So Veeam Backup on replication can be your service provider management interface, and for the customer, in this case, you can provide the browser access to the public cloud appliance, to the UI of, it's a web UI of the appliance itself. So customer doesn't have access to your entire Veeam Backup and replication server. He will have access just to his appliance with all the inventory he has in it, with the protected data, with the backup jobs, so he can trigger them, etc. For licensing and reporting, we have Veeam Service Provider Console, which cannot work without Cloud Connect. So this Veeam Backup and replication can be managed by Cloud Connect, which is also connected to Veeam Service Provider console, and you will have a licensing visibility. But management of the appliance is available in Veeam Backup on application and in the browser, so the contents of it. The pros and cons. So this is the POD design, so it means that you have one appliance per tenant, and when you need to share access and provide some self-service capabilities to your tenants, it's a nice scenario, and it's interconnected with the third layout, which I will cover a bit later. So pros of it, you run everything under one subscription, tenants or service providers, if it's a full-blown managed service. Self-service is available for the tenant, so he will have full access to his protected data, or if you utilize role-based access control, which is built into the appliance, there are 3 roles: administrator, less restrictive user, and the the basic one. So there are 3 users which can be assigned to your tenant. So if you would like to manage appliance in full, like deploy workers, add repositories, you have administrator role, and for backup and restore operations, you may assign a specific role to your tenant. Storage containers and workers can be deployed anywhere, in any region and anytime. The cons of this scenario is that everything is under one single subscription, so appliance per tenant is needed. Sometimes it's a corner case when service provider wants to have appliance at his end and maybe workers and repository on the customer end, or we go to the layout too, when service provider covers all backup operations on his own, and he has one single appliance for all the tenants and workers and S3 bucket deployed in his subscription. So this scenario is more difficult to deploy from AWS perspective, but if you are familiar with the technologies, you are free to do it. And in this case, you will just have your subscription with all your discounts applied for workers, for storage, and you will just resell backup as a service to your tenants. So tenants will just have their infrastructure. They are built for their resources, and you are built for workers, for S3 bucket, for the appliance itself. From the management perspective, it's all the same. You have a web browser access to your tenant, and you most likely will not share this access to any of the tenant, because otherwise they will see other tenants' data. Veeam Backup and Replication is still in place. Veeam Cloud Connect and Veeam Service Provider Console for licensing and reporting should be there as well. So pros and cons of this scenario: that shared access design means that you don't share access to the appliance, so you cover backup and restore operations. Bills and subscriptions are yours, so backup and recovers are covered by you. So you can also make this a selling point for your tenants, and everything is under your control, which is also a good case. So you don't need to rebuild Veeam Backup for AWS infrastructure in case your tenant will break the configuration. Cons of it: so self-service operations are available only if used on per tenant basis. So you can redraw the scheme and cover appliance, workers, and repository on your own, but you will not share any other resources between your tenants. So if you have the same layout but appliance per tenant, then self-service operations are available. Role-based access control will not split scopes of protected data. So if you share appliance between different tenants, role-based access control will just restrict operations, but it will still show all the data which is protected by the appliance. And share access exists between accounts. And we have a third scenario, which eliminates this limitation, this cons of the second scenario and the first one. So recently, we have released a new version of Veeam Service Provider Console and Veeam Cloud Connect. So now you can directly attach Veeam Backup for AWS appliance into Veeam Cloud Connect. And with Veeam Service Provider Console, you have the option not only to have licensing reporting, but also you can assign appliances to specific tenants. So I will show it in the lab, and it basically means that all the operations like restore or backup jobs, they are visible to the tenant in Veeam Service Provider Console. Restore operations are still available through Workstation web browser. So appliance has a public IP or a DNS name, the name dynamically generated by AWS, and you can access the appliance. You and your tenant can access appliance directly or from Veeam Service Provider Console. So pros and cons. Service Provider Console role-based access control, appliance per tenant, license and data management. Basically means that you add as many appliances as you want, and you can just throw them into the company in Veeam Service Provider Console, and data and restore operations will be visible just for this specific tenant. And you, as a service provider and administrator of Veeam Service Provider Console, you will see all the appliances, and you can run all the operations as well as administrator. So everything is under one single subscription, tenant or service provider, or you can split them so you can mix the scenarios just in case you need them. Self-service is available, so tenant will have full access to his protected data. Storage containers can be deployed in any region, anytime. S3 storage containers, S3 buckets. And role-based access control of Veeam Backup for AWS can be on top of that. But I would use Veeam Service Provider Console, of course. So the main consideration with this layout, so the third layout, this one, so Veeam Cloud Connect doesn't have backup copies, it doesn't have recoveries. So in Veeam Service Provider Console, when you click on file recovery or instance recovery, you will utilize Veeam Backup for AWS Appliance UI. So if it's not available in Veeam Service Provider Console, you can do nothing. You cannot make backup copies with Veeam Cloud Connect, and you cannot make recoveries. So layout 1 and layout 2 had Veeam Backup on replication, and it's not outdated, it's still actual. With Veeam Backup on replication, you don't have this simplified management, but you have more options to sell or to utilize within your service provider offering. So you can make backup copies, like, well, in some RFPs you have, or in tenants requirements, you might have the copy of the data to be placed on site, to be downloaded from hyperscaler, or to be sent to another hyperscaler, or anything like different region. So all of those are available with Veeam Backup on replication. So Veeam Cloud Connect doesn't have backup copies. And this is where we go to the cloud native solutions for AWS and Azure. So Veeam Backup for AWS and Azure. So the third layout covers this use case. Direct restore to AWS and Azure is partially covered with the third layout. External repository backup copy or migrate workloads to on-premises. This is Veeam Backup on replication. This is first or second layout. And capacity tier or direct backup copy to object storage is now available in Veeam Backup on replication. So let's let me check the questions and chat. If you have any questions, just drop them. It's still visible here. Okay, no questions meanwhile. So let's recap how it works. So in the cloud, so in EC2, in Amazon and AWS, we protect EC2 file shares, RDS, and VPC configuration. So on this slide, I have just EC2 to simplify things. So you have policies. Of course, you have to create a backup policy, not backup job, because it's a different concept. Backup job is in Veeam Backup on replication, Veeam Backup for AWS, it's a policy. So we utilize AWS API and grab the snapshot first, then we put backup once it's processed by worker into the object storage. So this M here means data mover. So data mover is installed on the worker appliance, and it's responsible for data processing. So before data is placed to object storage, it's compressed, then on object storage, it's also kind of deduped by object storage. If you add Veeam Backup and Replication from your premises, or Veeam Backup and Replication can be installed in a different hyperscaler or in the same hyperscaler. So we go here with Veeam Backup and Replication external repository. So appliance is visible, all the configuration within this appliance is visible in Veeam Backup and Replication, and you can run instant VM recovery directly from object storage. This has been announced and released quite a while ago. It works. So you can bypass repository, you just attach it as a management layer, and you recover it directly to your hypervisor. So backup copy can be triggered to your on-prem repository. It's initiated from Veeam Backup and Replication. So in Veeam Appliance, in Veeam Backup for AWS, it will not go here. You should have Veeam Backup and Replication for it to make a backup copy. In Veeam Cloud Connect, there is also no backup copy. Full recovery on premises from backup copy. So once your backups are here and you might have Veeam Appliance in the cloud, or you might lose it. So you can recover the data to your premises from Veeam Backup and Replication repository. Direct restore to the cloud. So direct restore back to AWS can be done from this repository. So this is just following 3-to-1 rule. So you have data in object storage in the same hyperscaler, which is done by Veeam Backup for AWS, and you have data on your repository. And from Veeam Backup and Replication, you can trigger direct restore to AWS, to Azure, to Google, so to any hypervisor you have. So, yep, restore from AWS to Azure and reverse. So if you have no Veeam Backup and Replication repository, but still you have a regular Veeam Backup and Replication management console, and your data is in S3, you can also make a right mouse button click on the available backup and restore it directly to another hyperscaler, which is Azure in this case. Or you can migrate data back to on-premises, just like I told you before. Does it make sense? And we have a question. So let me try to. What object storage repository is best practices to use when backing up AWS EC2? So that's a good question. Standard is the best one, so it's kind of the fastest. And if you want to pay less money, you can utilize other tiers. So Glacier is usually the archive tier. So standard tier is enough. You can mix it with infrequent access. It's also supported, but it's up to you. It will work, but the speed of backup and recoveries is on AWS side. And this is a very good question, because the next slide is sizing, and I have nothing about storage tiers here. So there are components which you should size. They are core components in our today's conversation. It's a control plane, Veeam Backup for AWS appliance, data movers, which are workers, object storage, S3 repository, and Veeam Backup and Replication. Optionally, you might have block storage for backup copies, object storage for secondary cloud copy, data movers for backup copy, and cross-cloud recovery. First of all, I would like to highlight Veeam Backup and Replication here. As per Q&A tests, there is nothing to size here. So if you have some resources in Veeam Backup and Replication, so it's not tightly sized. You might have, well, 50 AWS appliances without any extra resources added. So there is no sizing estimation like 50 megabyte per appliance yet available, because we haven't yet met any service provider who has a ton of Veeam Backup for AWS appliances. So we will speak about appliance, workers, and S3 repositories. Optional components can be sized with regular Veeam Backup and Replication capabilities. So the same amount of resources like for regular virtual infrastructure. Just keep it in mind. Data movers on repositories, space on repository. This is very similar to regular workloads. So core components to size. The first one is appliance in AWS, so which is a control plane. Here are 3 examples. The first one is T3 medium, 2 CPU and 4 gigs of RAM. It can cover up to 1,000 workloads. The next one is T3 2X large, 8 CPU and 32 gigs of RAM. It can cover up to 5,000 workloads. And C5 9X large, 36 CPU and 72 gigs of RAM. It can cover up to 10,000 workloads. So these values are based on Q&A testing. So these are real values, not calculated in some artificial intelligence. So this has been tested. And resources. So EC2 workloads, 250 can be added within the smallest appliance, and with C5 9X large, you can protect up to 2,500 EC2 workloads. There is also accounts number, so you can add accounts into the control plane just for management maybe purposes, or different accounts from your tenants. So T3 medium can cover up to 100 accounts, and the largest C5 9X large can cover up to 300 accounts when needed. VPC policies have no limits, so it's only one policy, so nothing has been tested, nothing to test here. The next one is S3 repository. So in general, required space, which we calculate, is less than 50% of the source data. On top of that, there will be, of course, S3 object storage dedupe. So it will be less than 50% in the long run. For the initial run, it will be less than 50%. So backup data object storage block size is 1 megabyte. Archive tier stores data within 512 megabyte blocks. Metadata is 4 kilobyte per gig, so you can count on it. If we would speak about Azure or Google, I would say about the storage speed, storage account capabilities, write capabilities to put it into your attention. But AWS has another limitation on put and get requests. So there are no limits on the number of prefixes in a bucket, but you can increase your read and write performance by using parallelization. So this is the recommendation by AWS. So if you want to speed up your backups, you might deploy several S3 buckets. It's a simple logic for parallelism. So not to break into any limitations of AWS, just use several buckets. Veeam Backup for AWS has a built-in mechanism not to break into these limitations. So we will anyway break into them if you utilize your S3 on the maximum level and you utilize the heavy workers. So just as a common sense, use separate S3 buckets for maybe heavy workloads. The next one is workers. So for Azure and for Google, we could estimate it like 200 megabit per second and even more. So we have profiles which are configurable in Veeam Backup for AWS appliance. So small profile will be used for volumes which are less than 1 terabyte. C5X large, it's a medium, will be used for 1000 gig to 1250 gigs. Large profile will be used for volumes which are larger than 1250 gigs. And you can identify a different size for it. For archiving, it's different. So you can identify these appliances and leave them as default, or you can change the size. In terms of data processing, so it's like a proxy. It processes the data, it makes compression and puts it to your S3 bucket. So from the tests we've done previously, within the same region, you can get up to 2 gigs per second. But the slowest was 50 megabyte per second. And we couldn't find any, well, not the logic, but structure behind it to put some speeds here. We can definitely say about 200 megabyte per second, but it can be even higher. So 50 megabyte per second is a corner case, and usually it's like 200 megabyte. With the larger volumes, with the larger workers, it will be a bit faster. That's inside the region. Out of region, speed jumps once again up to 200 megabyte per second, but it's different from time to time. So for the same infrastructure, it can be different. So if you can test it in your environment, or maybe you have already tested and you can drop some information in the chat, that would be great, and we can all discuss it. So let me now speak about the other solutions. So we have introduced recently the public cloud agents. Those are available in Veeam Backup on replication, and these are new. This is the same agent, but it has a new discovery rule in Veeam Backup on replication. It can be discovered by Veeam Backup on replication. So your virtual machines in AWS can be discovered by your public cloud subscription. So you don't need to make Active Directory rescan or IP or CSV file. So it's now available for your subscription as well in Veeam Backup on replication. In Veeam Service Provider Console, it's still 3 old-fashioned rules, like IP-based, Active Directory, or CSV file. Basically, a list of IP addresses. What can I say as a pros for this agent approach? So there are no snapshots, and this makes this solution cheaper in the large scale. For small installations, it's also cheaper because if you have some tenants with 6 VMs or 10 VMs or 20 VMs, the price for the snapshot will be ridiculous. So it means that keeping the processed virtual machine online, not powered off, is way cheaper than to trigger snapshots, then put up workers, then process this data and put it to S3. So this Veeam Backup for public cloud approach is more expensive than just simply agents which are running within the public cloud virtual machine. The cons of it that you cannot estimate the time. So with workers and their assignments and snapshots processing, you have some advantages on top. So it's more performative. You can estimate the processing time. You have almost no impact to your production VM. So Veeam Backup for AWS approach is still preferable for production installation. For small environments, usually I see Veeam agents in use. And the next one is VMware Cloud and AWS. So we have it. We have this integration. We have a knowledge base article with some limitations on it. So sure backup cannot be running, and replication is not also the case. But you can still use it. It will be visible in Veeam Backup and replication, just like VMware infrastructure. So it's a bit out of the scope. So let me go into my lab and show you how Veeam Backup for AWS looks like. Yeah, there is a question, a nice one. There is a more impact on the virtual machines when using Veeam agents. Yes, that's definitely the case. But if we speak about some small infrastructure and virtual machines can be boot up during the night, which also another cost. Yeah, you can have no impact, but it's the matter of the scenario and of the tenant you have. But snapshots can be really expensive. So I had a customer a couple of years ago, tenant, who was requesting from service provider Veeam Backup for AWS appliance. And when they implemented it, they actually changed the solution. We had no direct to object storage then, and they were using agents in the end and deployed regular repository in the cloud, because data should reside in the cloud, with the cheapest disk possible. And it was even in this scenario, it was cheaper than making snapshots. So I would strongly advise to test it. Luckily, in Veeam Backup for public cloud, we have a cost estimator. I will show it to you a bit later. So this is my Veeam Service Provider console, and we will speak about this scenario, this one, because this is the most priority for us now, and the product will be deployed in this fashion. So Veeam Service Provider console will be developed in the appliance per tenant way, not in the shared responsibility mode, not in the shared pod design. So the initial configuration can be what you should do first. So you have your Veeam Service Provider console. You logged as administrator here. So you have configuration and you have a plugin library here. So a lot of there, but we have Veeam Backup for public clouds. Okay, fine. So a small instruction for you. First of all, you should add accounts. In my scenario, I have just AWS, but you can add Azure as well. But let's speak about AWS. So mine is already added, so you should have access key and secret key here. How you can get it, you can go to AWS, go to your identity access management. Oops, sorry, hold on, I will come back. I actually have another one opened. Yep, here it goes. Okay, so I showed you how to get the access key and secret key, right? So this is the first step when you try to add the account. Okay, so here is my AWS management console. We go to IAM, find my user. And my user. I'm also without the mouse, so it will be a bit slower now. Hope you don't mind. So here is my user. You can find your own user. And here we have security credentials. So I have 2 access keys, so you can create the new one for you and have it pasted into Veeam Service Provider console. So once you have done it, I'm curious if I can hide it. Yeah, okay. Once you have added it, you can add appliances. So the next step is appliances. So you add the new one, AWS, choose the site. You can deploy a new appliance straight from Veeam Service Provider console, or you can connect to existing appliance if your tenant already has Veeam Backup for public cloud for AWS deployed on his premises, and he just wants you to help him manage this infrastructure. But let's go through the UI of deploying new one. So if we connect, it's a bit simpler, not so interesting. We go next. Here are licensing policies by Veeam, which you should be familiar with. You click I accept. Then I have my account here, region, where I would like to deploy it. It's global or GovCloud US. Data center, which is actually a region in my understanding. My appliance is deployed in Paris already. So let's put it into London. Sorry, my appliance is in Stockholm and data is in Paris. So let's put it London. Then we go with EC2 instance name. So it's how you will see it in AWS console. So let it be my test webinar 1. Network and security group and VPC can be created automatically. But if you would like to specify anything under your subscription, you can put it manually. For the simplicity, I will go with default ones. So IP address from which Cloud Connect server I will access it, not from Service Provider console, from Veeam Cloud Connect server. Just like I showed in the layout 3, we have Cloud Connect server actually connected to the appliance. Service Provider console is a management layer on top of it. If you would like to utilize static IP address, you can use it. I usually don't use it. I'm fine with AWS generated DNS name, publicly available. Guest OS doesn't mean that we will choose any guest OS. We just should define the account, the administrator account and key pair. So you can utilize the existing one or generate the new one. And let's name it once again, Max Test 1. And I would like to save a local copy, of course. Then we should put here a time zone. And now it will populate the credentials. So the time zone will be either in London, UK. Nope. Let's find Europe. Okay, Paris is almost fine. Next, finish, and it will start deploying. So I had, when I prepared this webinar, one appliance took me like less than 10 minutes to deploy, another one deployed for 25 minutes. So let's click finish and see how it goes. I have already deployed an appliance, just to click around and see what you can do with this. But we will see how it goes, and if it will be deployed in the end, I will show you the next steps. Okay, let's wait for the lab to be recovered. Or it's my VPN. Let's try to reconnect. So yeah, guys, it's not the recording, it's a live session. Okay, the new appliance, which is Max Test Webinar 1, is now installing. You can check the steps here. So it takes some time. We will see how long will it take. But I have the one deployed already here. I have also repositories here. So repo AWS, which is not available, and VCSP Paris, which is available. So once you have added it here, you are able to see the data out of the configuration. So in backup jobs, we have virtual machines here. So this is regular virtual infrastructure and public clouds. So I have 5 VMs protected by my pre-deployed appliance, and you as an administrator, you can start or stop this backup jobs. You can create a policy for my appliance, and we are redirected to Veeam Backup for AWS UI. I will cancel it. It will send me back to Veeam Service Provider console, kind of smooth operations. Let's go to protected data, and in protected data, virtual machines, public cloud, I have also these 5 virtual machines with 1 backup and 1 snapshot, and we can make restores. So we can make instance restore, the full recovery, volume restore, and file level recovery. So if I click on instance restore, I am redirected to Veeam Backup for AWS, and here I'm able to choose the restore point, like snapshot or data which has been in the S3, account, temporary access keys, if it's the case, workers, where they should be deployed. You can restore to original location, to a new location, or with different settings. And here we have just AWS regions. So new location doesn't mean any Veeam Backup or application installation, is just within the AWS appliance. So if we restore to original location, nothing to choose anymore. If we restore to a new location, we should define the encryption settings network. So let's try to recover it into Milan. Okay, Milan is not enabled. Then let's try Stockholm, which is definitely enabled. AWS Outpost, I haven't configured it. I have no outpost. So then encryption, use original encryption scheme or restore as encrypted instance, and you should choose the key here. We will use original. Next, settings. You can rename this virtual machine. You can choose a different size for it. All of them are not manually written here. They are inherited from AWS. So I will change nothing. No, I should change something. Okay. Let's put it C5X large. Apply. Next, so network should be assigned here. Let's take a look. What do we have here? So default VPC and default subnet. Public IP address if it's needed or not. Apply. Security group. Sorry, my bad. Default one. Okay, fine. Now we apply. We go to the next, check the reason, summary, one item will be restored, and we click finish. And I cannot restore. Some of my settings might have errors. I hope you will not have this in your configuration, so you should test it. The main point is to show you how you can work with it. So you can make full recoveries or partial granular recoveries. So I have also companies here. So I created the VSPC AWS company, and I have one administrator here, and actually my appliance is assigned to this company. So plugin library, Veeam Backup for public clouds, and appliances. So here I have a company assigned, VSPC AWS. And I will log into it now to show you that it's visible for the tenant as well. So now I'm administrator of the console. Okay, now let's go back and change a user. This one is definitely wrong. This one, but I should wait. Okay, here we are. So this is my test tenant. I'm a company owner, and let's check. So I have the same amount of virtual machines inherited from the Veeam backup for AWS. So I can do start, stop, enable, disable, create policy, edit, remove, etc. In terms of protected data, so I can make this same recoveries for instances, for volumes, for file level recovery. And yeah, I can also go into configuration, check plugin library. I see here Veeam backup for public clouds. I can add more accounts here or repositories. So this Veeam backup for public cloud have been added by service provider. So when you edit, you should also keep in mind that during one of the steps when you add this appliance, you create a specific user for the tenant. So when you edit from administrator, you are administrator of the appliance. So it will be not visible for your tenant, so he cannot remove it from configuration to avoid any troubleshooting. Now let's go back to my admin. And see how the installation goes. Okay, plugin library, backup for public clouds, appliances. So it's still installing. Okay, waiting for services to initialize. So it has almost been done. This loader doesn't give the exact number, so actually it usually jumps from 20 to 100%. So it has even installed updates automatically to the appliance. Waiting for appliance deployment to finish. Okay, let's take a look at the Cloud Connect. It's not Cloud Connect. Let's take a look at Cloud Connect, how it looks like there. So it's Cloud Connect. There is no specific tenants created until I manually create a company in Veeam Service Provider console. In my backup infrastructure, I have AWS here. Max VCSP and E1 is added here, backup appliance. So in the inventory, sorry, in the home tab, we have backup here. So this is EC2 policy. what we can do here, we can start, we can disable, delete, let's try to edit it, and we are redirected from Cloud Connect to the appliance. So if you lost the appliance, you will do nothing, but your backups will be available. So if you add your S3 repository as external repository into Veeam Backup and Replication, for example, it will be operational. So this is regular one. And they have backup infrastructure, external repository. So you can add external repository and see the data which resides in your public cloud. So here I have this backups cloud tab. Sorry, external repository. And I have some virtual machines here. These were tested previously, not the 5, but just 2 VMs are here, and you can run instant recovery here, restore guest files, restore to EC2, Azure, and Google. And actually, all the recovery options are available with Veeam Backup and Replication. So if your priority is to make backup copies, make some disaster recoveries in case you lost all the data, and then Veeam Backup and Replication. If it's not the case for you, so you rely on AWS 99 and 11.9's availability, then and management is the more priority for you, then you don't need Veeam Backup and Replication. Just Cloud Connect, Veeam Service Provider Console, and tenants around Veeam Service Provider Console. So yeah, I have to manually run my presentation, and the last slide where I would like to thank you for your attention. And yeah, sorry for technical issues. I hope it didn't break the experience and understanding of the webinar. And yeah, we will check the questions later and follow up separately during next days. So yeah, that's it. I would like to thank you all. So Liana, if you can end the webinar, that would be great.